Story 1. Urban Despair: The Subway Abduction. It was New Year's Eve, and the city was alive with anticipation and excitement. I had decided to take the subway to meet my friends for the countdown to midnight. As I descended the stairs into the dimly lit station, a sense of unease crept over me. The usual hustle and bustle of the subway was eerily absent, and the air felt heavy with an unspoken dread. I boarded the train, the only passenger in the carriage, and settled into a seat by the window. The train lurched forward, the rhythmic clatter of the tracks filling the silence. As we plunged into the darkness of the underground tunnels, a chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, the train screeched to a halt, the lights flickering ominously. Panic rose in my chest as I realized we were stranded in the tunnel, far from the next station. I fumbled for my phone, but there was no signal underground. A sense of foreboding washed over me as I heard a faint whispering coming from the shadows at the end of the carriage. I strained my eyes to see through the darkness, but there was nothing there. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, sending shivers down my spine. And then, without warning, a figure materialized from the shadows. A tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. My heart pounded in my chest as he slowly made his way towards me, each step echoing like a death knell in the confined space of the subway car. I tried to scream, to run, but I was frozen in place, held captive by his malevolent gaze. He reached out a hand towards me, his touch like ice against my skin, and then everything went black. When I awoke, I was no longer on the train. I was in a dimly lit room, bound and gagged, surrounded by other captives. The man stood before us, his smile widening as he reveled in our terror. As the countdown to midnight began, a sense of dread settled over us. We were his prisoners, his victims, doomed to a fate unknown. And as the clock struck midnight, the man's laughter filled the room, a chilling echo of the horror that awaited us. Anonymous Spectator Story. Story 2. Sinister Abductions in Central Park: A New Year's Nightmare. As the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve, the bustling city of New York quieted down, enveloped in a blanket of darkness. I found myself wandering through Central Park, the crisp winter air sending shivers down my spine. The park, usually teeming with life, now lay eerily silent under the pale glow of the moon. I had always been drawn to abandoned places, their decaying walls whispering tales of the past. Central Park, despite its beauty, held a dark secret within its depths. Stories of mysterious disappearances and unexplained phenomena had plagued the park for decades, but I was determined to uncover the truth. As I ventured deeper into the park, a sense of unease crept over me. The familiar sounds of the city were replaced by an ominous silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the cold wind. Shadows danced around me, playing tricks on my mind as I navigated the winding paths. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, its silhouette barely visible in the dim light. My heart raced as I tried to make out its features, but it seemed to flicker and fade like a ghost. I quickened my pace, the feeling of being watched sending a chill down my spine. I stumbled upon an old, dilapidated building hidden deep within the park. Its crumbling facade loomed ominously in the moonlight, windows boarded up and doors hanging off their hinges. Despite the warning signs, a strange compulsion drew me closer, as if an invisible force beckoned me inside. As I stepped through the threshold, a wave of dread washed over me. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the sound of my footsteps echoed through the empty halls. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes that seemed to watch my every move. I heard faint whispers in the darkness, indiscernible voices that seemed to speak directly into my mind. Panic gripped me as I realized I was not alone in the abandoned building. Shadows flitted past me, their icy touch sending shivers down my spine. In a moment of sheer terror, I felt a cold hand clamp down on my shoulder, its grip like ice against my skin. I turned to face my assailant, but there was nothing there, only darkness and the echoing laughter of unseen entities. As I tried to flee, the walls seemed to shift and twist, trapping me in a nightmarish maze of corridors that led me further into the heart of darkness. The whispers grew louder, their words filling my mind with unspeakable horrors. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the darkness consumed me, swallowing me whole into its depths. My screams echoed through the abandoned building, a final plea for help lost in the void. Anonymous Spectator Story. Story 3. Shadows on Main Street, a terrifying abduction in a small town. As the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve, the small town of Willow Creek was enveloped in an eerie silence. The streets, usually bustling with laughter and celebration, were now shrouded in darkness, casting long, menacing shadows on Main Street. I stood alone, a sense of foreboding creeping over me as I watched the deserted town square from my window. It was then that I saw them, a group of cloaked figures emerging from the shadows, their movements synchronized and purposeful. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized they were heading towards the old abandoned church at the end of Main Street. Curiosity mingled with fear as I felt an inexplicable pull drawing me towards them. Ignoring the voice of reason in my head, I ventured out into the cold night, following the mysterious figures from a safe distance. The closer I got to the church, the more my unease grew, a primal instinct warning me of impending danger. As I reached the churchyard, I hid behind a crumbling gravestone, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The figures had gathered in a circle, their hushed whispers sending shivers down my spine. I strained to hear their words, catching fragments of a chilling incantation that made my blood run cold. Suddenly, a blinding light pierced the darkness, illuminating the church in an otherworldly glow. And then I saw her, a young woman, her eyes wide with terror, being led towards the church by the cloaked figures. I watched in horror as they forced her inside, the heavy doors closing behind them with a resounding thud. A sense of helplessness washed over me, knowing that I was the only witness to this sinister abduction. Driven by a surge of adrenaline, I made a split-second decision to confront the cultists and rescue the woman. As I pushed open the church doors, a wave of heat and sulfur assaulted my senses, making me gag. The interior was bathed in an eerie red light, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. In the center of the room, the cultists stood in a circle, their eyes gleaming with fanaticism as they chanted in unison. In the middle, the woman lay bound and helpless, her eyes pleading for salvation. Without hesitation, I lunged towards the cultists, my fists connecting with their bodies in a frenzy of desperation. A fierce battle ensued, the air thick with the stench of sweat and fear. I fought with a primal ferocity, my mind consumed by a single thought, to save the woman from the clutches of these deranged zealots. And then, in a moment of clarity, I saw my chance and seized it, breaking the woman free from her restraints. Together, we fled the church, the cultists' enraged cries echoing behind us. As we emerged into the cold night air, A sense of relief washed over me, knowing that we had escaped the clutches of evil. The woman clung to me, her eyes filled with gratitude and fear, as we ran towards the safety of the town. But as we reached the edge of Willow Creek, a sudden realization dawned on me. The cultists were not defeated, merely delayed. And in that moment, I knew that our ordeal was far from over, that the shadows on Main Street held secrets darker than we could ever imagine. Anonymous Spectator Story.